nutrient management. He's tried a lot of things. And, but he was interested. He wanted to see what the ISA program was all about, decided to be a part of that program. And there's his quote. He said, you know, I always thought I was doing everything pretty good in terms of nitrogen stewardship, but it turned out I had room for improvement. So we kind of use the title here of you can't manage what you don't measure. So we wanted to think about what tools were available to us to help farmers do this maybe on a simple way or a low cost, pretty easy way that they could just stick their toe in the water in this monitoring measurement area and really kind of model that process that Tim showed that was so valuable to him in participating in the ISA tile monitoring process. So Claire Lindahl, who is the former executive director of the Conservation Districts of Iowa, and I stuck our heads together and thought about the different tools that were available. And we knew that the Iowa Water Testing Program, the volunteer monitoring program, had used simple nitrate testing strips, and that they had taken a look at those, made sure that they were adequate to measure stream water. And so we looked at those and a couple other different options and found that for the cost and usability of those, ease of disposal, there was no chemicals to work with, that sort of thing. Those were something that we wanted to explore a little further. There was also a state soil conservation committee grant RFP open to fund a project just like this. It was around tools for farmers to monitor and measure their water or their soil. So we put together a proposal. That grant was funded, and we started this process. So what we came up with was RetaiN, kind of a play on nitrogen and keeping the nutrients in the field using the large N in our logo. So we wanted to make something simple, something that farmers could use themselves, something that we wouldn't require submission of that data into any sort of database, because there is concern on the part of farmers that, well, will I have a target on my back if I find something that I'm not happy with? Will I have the opportunity to look at it myself first before being a part of something? And that might make them reluctant to want to be a part of that process. So we created these kits, something simple, easy to use, using that hawk nitrate testing strip that had come recommended from our own volunteer monitoring network and a couple from around the North Central region as well. And put it together in a simple box that could be mailed. The testing strips need to stay room temperature. So we get a lot of folks asking, why does it have to be so big when the little bottle is just not very big? But we wanted something that farmers wouldn't stick in the pickup and have it roll under the seat and they forget about it. They want to make sure it's kept with them in the house, in their shop, where it's more climate controlled, and those results stay accurate. So that's simple. Along with that bottle, the hawk nitrate testing strips. These are easy to use strips. You dip them into the water. At 30 seconds, you get a nitrite reading. At 60 seconds, a nitrate reading. Add those two numbers together, and you get your nitrate reading for that sample of water that you've taken. So there's a color chart on that bottle. Compare it to that color chart, and that's how you get the reading. So there's not the precision that you would get if you would take a grab sample and send it into a lab, but for something that you can go out and take weekly or every other week, which is what we recommend to farmers, it's really simple and easy to use, and it's something that doesn't take that extra step of finding your bottle, mailing it in, or coordinating with someone. So it's a great first step in this monitoring and measuring process. Along in the box with the test strips, we've created a booklet, and this walks the farmer through the process of how nitrate is lost in Iowa, our challenges that we have on the landscape, the instructions for reading the results and taking the results, some guidance on retaining your nitrogen, and then those practices that were identified in the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. So it's taking the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy and boiling it down into a little pocket guide of all of those practices. It also gives them a log for their results. So they have a where they can keep that all in one location, take some notes of rainfall in the past couple of days, the results that they measured, any other notes that they want to take note of, and then we also include our project supporters in that as well. So there's just a quick snapshot of the inside of the booklet. So each practice has some information like this. There's an icon on each practice, a short description, and a quote from a farmer. So we want to make sure that these kind of came endorsed from some of our conservation leaders in the state. So for instance, we have Bob Lynch from Humboldt County, active conservation districts of Iowa member, giving a quote about his experience using cover crops. So it relates them to a farmer leader, or it relates that practice with a farmer leader. And then we built a project website. So it's always important to have a home base for this information. And we've basically replicated everything that comes in the booklet and in the kit on this website. So if they want to take a look at this in more depth, and on their desktop, they can take a look through all of the resources that are available. Our contact information is there. A video on how to use the kit is also there, how to use the test strips. So if they're feeling a little bit reluctant, want a refresher on how that strip is used, there's a short, about 3-minute video that walks through that process as well. Also, our process of requesting a kit is on this too. So our initial kit distribution, so the grant funded about 1,000 kits to be purchased and distributed. So we took about the first 250 and created a pilot program. And we identified both watershed coordinators and extension county or regional specialists out throughout the state, so we had good distribution around the state, and asked them if they would distribute between 5 and 20 kits, depending on what they thought they could use in about a year and a half time, and distribute it out through that way. So as we initially rolled it out, we wanted to make sure that there was a contact person that they knew and were comfortable with, that they could ask, troubleshoot any issues that they had, share their results if they want, but if they didn't want to, they wouldn't have to. And again, there's no central database where they're entering in this information. So those are the locations around the state. Many of them were water quality initiative projects. So it also was a great engagement tool for some of those coordinators that were just getting started. And when they're going on farm visits, to take those along and hand it out as they're going out and building those relationships with the farmers in their watersheds. So again, the initial, really covered this. 250 roughly kits went out through watershed coordinators and extension specialists. So after that initial about 18 months, so make sure that those farmers had gone through a growing season, or at least a good part of a growing season with the kits. We did an email and phone survey of the watershed coordinators and the farmers and landowners through those watershed coordinators and extension specialists. So we asked them a lot of feedback questions about the kits themselves, about the materials, about the process, really to help us to understand what we might change or what improvements we could make with the kits to make them more usable and easier to use, anything that would make it to help the other farmers that might use it into the future. So we found that about 95% would test again if they were available. So almost all of them found at that time that it was worth their time, especially for a free kit. About 81% would be willing to purchase it on their own. So that was also a good sign. We initially had the grant funds to be able to purchase these kits and distribute them for free, but we know that may not last forever. So we wanted to make sure we knew if they'd be willing to pay for those, and if so, how much. So we asked a range. I think we started at maybe 10 and went up to $25 or $30. The kits themselves cost in the neighborhood of about $35 to $37, depending on the quantity that we order at one time. So they said they would pay between $15 and $20 a kit. So that does present a challenge, that it doesn't cover the entire cost, but also good news that they would be willing to pay for at least part of it. So into the future, we thought, well, that would be one way to keep this going, is if we charged at least a partial amount for the kit. We also had some great quotes from our watershed coordinators initially about the project. So they said this was long overdue and needed. It fits well with our water quality programs in our counties. And another quote, it's an excellent tool to introduce farmers within my WQI watershed to monitoring. It's confidential and free. It's a great way for them to begin the process of identifying potential issues, great conversation starter about the site-specific outputs, and provided a nice gift to bring when they do site visits. So they did see it as a way to have that conversation and kind of have a parting gift as they go. So we took that information, had a few just modifications to make the booklet more usable, increased the size of the logbook area, made some modifications to the cost, shopped around a little bit more on printing, and have since distributed about 1,500 kits. So took that feedback and applied it and continued to grow the program. After that initial pilot phase, we had a lot of interest from different farm press publications, newsletters from different organizations, a few radio interviews. So once new ideas are out there, a lot of folks are interested and want to learn more. So we had a lot of great press surrounding the project, and in turn created some interest in more requests for kits. Another great partnership that developed was with Iowa Corn Growers Association. So we worked really closely with Ben Gleason. He took this concept to his board and asked for funding, and over the past 3 years, we've been fortunate to have Ben as a partner providing kits out to their members, excuse me, and at some of their crop fairs and other field days and events that they sponsor as an organization. So I think that's been an outstanding partnership, and we're looking forward to continuing that. Over 600 kits have been distributed by Iowa Corn, and so it's been a good portion of the kits that have been distributed have been through that partnership. So it's been great to have that partnership with Iowa Corn on that. So now we wanted to look back again. So in 2018, did a Qualtrics survey, so online survey, out to farmers that we had contact information for. So I did want to talk about that as a limitation. We distributed that to watershed coordinators to send out to their farmers that they know had used the kits, extension specialists, same, kind of using those folks as hubs out to the farmers that they have worked with, and then also to the individuals that have sent in individual requests for the kits through the RetaiN Iowa website. So limitations to that. We're not always asking for that contact information, so we can't sample that full population in an evaluation like this. So I've had, in this survey, 34 responses. It's still open, so I hope to receive more, send a few more reminders, but I think it does give us a sense of, at this point, 3 years in, what are farmers still thinking about these kits? So the first question I asked is, how did you use the RetaiN nitrate testing strip? So I gave them options, and they could check all that applied. So the first one was to test water from a farm field, from a tile line. So that was the most popular answer. To test water flowing into or flowing out of a conservation practice. So we had a few farmers that requested the kit specifically after they installed a bioreactor and wanted to test the influent and outflow of that particular practice. To test a river or stream near their farm. To test a stream in an urban area as an educational tool for agricultural audiences. So we have relationships with a lot of folks that are working with women landowners, with field days and events, and have used this as a great demo. So they'll grab a sample from a nearby tile, with farmers' permission, of course, with a nearby stream, and just demonstrate the kit to those audiences. So that's been a popular way for educators to use this. And then an educational tool for youth as well. So I've introduced this through the Water Rocks Teacher Summit that we have names every year. And so FFA teachers, science teachers, a couple of them have been engaging with their students and doing some monitoring as well. I asked how often they were testing. We recommend weekly or every other week, but we know that things get busy for a farmer, certainly, and we know that's not always possible. So monthly was the most popular answer to that question. So about 75% of them are sampling monthly, and the balance of those weekly and every other week. So we have a few very dedicated folks that are out there every week sampling, but vast majority are sampling monthly. And then I asked them to open it up for first a question.
What would we recommend if the tile lines don't run all the time?
I would recommend making a note of that so you know when you're not seeing that tile flow, and just note that in your logbook. And we know some, certain years, July, August timeframe when our crop is really growing and taking up water, but we're not receiving the rainfall, that we have those times of year where we don't see tile flow. So yeah, just go out and check it, and if it's not, just make a note in your logbook that no flow today, and you can tie it back to rainfall typically in time of year. So the one open-ended question I asked is, what did you like about the testing kit? So let them just tell me whatever they wanted to about this. And I plugged that in to generate a word cloud. And I thought this was pretty interesting but not surprising, what came up there. So easy was by far the most frequent word that they used to describe this. So farmers were looking for something simple, easy to use, water, quick, understand. So all of those things that show that this was a great, simple process for them to do this testing themselves, and great positive words out of that open-ended question. And then the other question that I was really interested in is, has the testing experience influenced any of the following actions? And I want to make sure that folks don't think that I feel like this process or this testing kit is something magical. It's the only thing influencing some of these outcomes. I know there's a lot of things going into this, but I wanted to ask this to see if they felt like this was part of any of these positive actions. And it's a little small. First top one there is, my tile is now being monitored by Iowa Soybean Association, a local watershed project, or conservation and agricultural group. So about 4 people indicated that. So because of the small sample size, I don't want to extrapolate too much to the larger group, that's something that's occurring widespread, but I think that's great that a few of the farmers already see that they were interested, they saw this as a good first step, and then they were willing to go that next step to a more grab sample monitoring process. The next one, I have initiated or installed a new conservation practice to reduce nitrate loss. So that's another one. We didn't want to have them make drastic changes right away based on a few high samples. We definitely encourage sampling over a year or 2 before installing something based on this monitoring. But there have been, likely folks that were already on the fence, and this is what really kicked them over the edge on that, and went ahead and installed the practice. So again, about 4 to 5 folks that indicated that this was part of that process. The third there, I have considered installing a new conservation practice to reduce nitrate loss. So they're in that decision-making phase, and this is part of helping them to think through that. I have attended a field day or workshop to learn more about water quality. So that's great. We like to see that this is helping them to engage more fully and in other ways with water quality information. Second to last, I have consulted with a conservation professional about conservation and water quality options. So they're going out and seeking advice from other professionals about what they might install. And then the most common response, I'm continuing to monitor my tile using the RetaiN nitrate testing kit. So we think that's another great outcome. They're still interested enough to continue to do this, and by far the most popular response there. And then we wanted to ask that question about what they'd be willing maybe to pay for this kit if it wasn't supported by grants. So let them know that it was currently funded by grants and by support from the Iowa Corn Growers Association. So in the future, would they be willing to pay, at least in part, for this kit? And about 60% said they would. So thought that was good, but that still leaves with about 40% that said no. So we try to keep offering the kits free for their first kit, either through their watershed group. Some of the watershed coordinators are purchasing the kits with their education and information dollars. And we're also still seeking grants and other ways to keep offering those first kits free. What's the maximum you would be willing to pay for the kit? So for the most part, the lowest end of the spectrum there, about $15 was what 60% of the respondents said. The rest of the group was in the 20 to 30 range. So good information there. And then I asked them an optional question. They didn't have to let me know where they resided, but I asked the county if they would like to let me know, or the watershed that they were sampling in. So each of those little RetaiN logos represents a person that responded to the survey and where they're located within the state, not exactly their location, just within their crop reporting district, to give us an idea of where they're located. So a heavy concentration in central Iowa, which is great. That's where a lot of our tile drainage is, heavily tile drained areas are. So that's the area that we want to really focus a lot of education around nitrate loss and engage farmers and landowners in this process. But we see a nice distribution around the rest of the state as well in some of our tile drained areas. Another recent development, I got a call from a gentleman at Farmers Co-op Association in Forest City. He said he read an article in Corn and Soybean Digest about the kits and said, you know, I think this is really something that our co-op needs to do. So what we decided to do, I put a newsletter or an article in our newsletter that goes out monthly to our members. And we have 20 kits that we're going to put on the desk and say it's a first come, first serve. And he said, he called me a couple days into March and said, well, the first kits are gone, so can I request 20 more? And I said, sure, I'll get them in the mail today. So they have 40 kits going out to farmers, and they're going to be doing tile sampling in their area. They also have agronomists, so I sent out some individual test strip bottles, and their agronomists are going to go out and sample streams. So he's really taking a watershed approach to maybe define some areas in the watershed where they might focus some of their efforts, might look at changing up some nutrient management or installing some practices in those areas. So I thought that was a great outcome of this project, was that the co-op was willing to take this on and really take leadership in organizing a sampling effort in their territory up around Forest City. So next steps for us, we want to continue to seek funding. Like I said, the information about how much farmers are willing to pay for each of these kits lets us know that we at least need to have them subsidized in some way, or continue to offer that first kit free and ask for them to pay for any future kits. We want to keep expanding partnerships with agribusinesses and exploring new audiences. We know, as Lori's data showed us, that folks have their outlets for information. So if we keep working our way into other circles, we'll keep expanding the reach of this project and of this opportunity. And we want to explore other citizen science and on-farm science tools. So this was really an outcome of looking at a citizen science program in Iowa Water. And we want to explore what other opportunities there might be. So being it's the middle of the afternoon and you guys had a carby lunch, I'm going to turn the questions over to you. And have some discussion. So are there other measurements that you think farmers might be interested in taking on their farm, like the RetaiN kits? Yes?
Yeah, I just started looking at our stream data together with flow to estimate yield. And that was really eye-opening to see, you relate how many pounds of nitrate are washing up the stream, and it seems like that might be a little add-on that you could at least ballpark.
Sure.
Kind of know what's the typical size for a drainage district and measure how quickly the water is filling up your beaker.
Yes, great addition. And we talked about adding a little widget to our website, and doing that. It's just one of those things we haven't gotten done yet, where they can just plug in, take a bucket out, have a known amount of time, known volume, and they have everything they need to know for calculating that load. And we can even give them some estimates for different parts of the state. working with our research folks that take that data all year round. We can give them a fairly good ballpark of their water yield and give them the ability to calculate load. So great, I'm glad you think that would be useful as well. So we'll continue to pursue that. Yes, Ron?
Is there a simplified phosphorus one
There-
rather than other one that's pretty complex?
Yeah, and there are the hot strips for that too for dissolved, but it's not something I've explored yet. So,
Okay.
but that's been on my mind as well with certainly the Lake Erie issues and awareness around what dissolved phosphorus can do. So I'll keep that on my list as well.
Soil erosion, farmers need to get a better handle on that.
Yeah. How do you measure soil erosion within your field?
Visually.
Visually, okay. Is there a calibration that we could maybe come up with that,
Yeah, there's some reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
yeah,
it's kind of physical, so it's easy.
I agree. I just haven't been able to come up with a simple. Rick, yeah, I'll talk to Rick.
The speaker before lunch mentioned several times the idea of having a citizens test for atrazine. Do you think that there's much interest in, on the part of anyone in the state testing for atrazine?
You know, I do get that question at times. You know, we've had such a focus on nitrogen and phosphorus that we haven't had a lot of conversations around some of the pesticides like atrazine. But yeah, you couldn't have set me up any better for this conversation when bringing up citizen science monitoring for atrazine. So that is something, you know, I always think of Missouri and some other states of having a bigger challenge with atrazine, but I think that's something worth noting. You know, maybe with a pilot group, we could test out different regions of the state, cover the cost of those kits, and just do a sample for a few months to see what they find. So, yes.
So for the erosion piece, that was in response to rain events, we're turbidity measurements that don't, that are
Like the
quantitative,
secondary
that have to do with, Regina knows about it. They're just a visual read, and you probably
Sure.
should know. But I'm also curious about the smattering of community colleges and small colleges that cross the entire state into
Sure.
rural areas, and using those as potential resource points for perhaps more quantitative. But I think the challenge there would be building a trust relationship with confidentiality.
Sure.
But if that could be achieved,
Yeah.
that
could be
could
an
create
exciting-
a community watershed, educational opportunity for students in that area, and also a service, frankly,
Right.
to the agriculture community.
Yeah, great idea. I've thought about that with FFA groups as well. You know, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, but it could be done at the high school.
Yeah.
There are grades of nitrate precision tests, but definitely some of them could be done at the high school level that would be more precise and
Sure.
stretched.
Yes.
One thing I think that makes growers reluctant to do things is the fear of not knowing where they stand. So is it possible for you to have select sites around the state that you have anonymity to, you have a consistent test, so that a grower in crop recording District 9 can say, this is where I'm at, this is what,
That's kind of my reference point for this
Yeah.
year and this time of year.
we'll make
Yeah.
changes if we have knowledge and a pathway to do it.
Sure.
But if we think we're the Lone Ranger, it's going to be
That's hard.
tough.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I like that. Okay. Any other? Okay, I have one more. What can we learn from other citizen science efforts? So today was a good example. Iowa Water is a good example. Any other citizen science efforts that you've heard of that might give us some clues to what we might develop in Iowa for farmers? This is going to be a tough one. That's okay. We kind of covered them all in the beginning. So great ideas. I'll jot all those down. So I did want to make everybody aware of a few tools that are available pretty readily to most farmers. So in the area offices, NRCS area offices, there are, and actually more beyond that as well, there are these 360 soil scan units. This is not a cappuccino maker. Test water and soil for nitrate. So works really simply, takes a little bit to calibrate. So it's not completely foolproof. It's not something a farmer would do, but we've seen several watershed coordinators and folks at the NRCS and Department of Ag offices invite farmers and say, we're going to have an open house from 10 to noon. Bring in your soil sample, bring in your water sample, and we'll run it through the 360 soil scan, and you'll have a reading immediately. So this is another way maybe to get a little bit more precision around that number and get folks to come in the office that maybe you wouldn't otherwise, but I think is a great option for those that have one of these machines near them. Also, getting to your soil measurement, each NRCS office has a soil health bucket. So these are simple tools that measure physical, chemical, biological properties of soil. So getting to maybe a farmer will set up a trial of cover, no cover, or till, no till, leave some check strips of a change that they're making. And these soil health buckets are available in every single NRCS field office. So some options there related to soil health beyond just nitrate, certainly. And then again, at select offices, there's a whole host of different types of tools. Several offices have the traveling rainfall simulator, so these really get more into engagement, not into those on-farm testing, but it might be something to bring folks in, help them start thinking about this, and then determine, okay, as a watershed or within our county, we are going to be dedicated to taking this measurement, and then we'll get back together in the winter and talk about what we found. So could be a possibility, and these are all out there for folks to use. So for RetaiN, we're continuing to take requests. Go to the retainiowa.com or .org. We have both websites. You just fill out that information sheet, and we'll mail a kit out to you. And it's as simple as that. Again, offer the first kit free, and then ask you to pay for it after that. So I want to, again, thank the folks that got this off the ground and are continuing to support the RetaiN project, the State Soil and Conservation and Water Quality Committee for providing the initial grant to get this started, Iowa Corn for their continued support, covering kit costs and distributing them through their various outlets. ISU Extension folks that are out distributing kits as well, and the watershed coordinators back on the IDAL side that are distributing and connecting with farmers with the kits as well, and then Conservation Districts of Iowa, who continues to be a great partner. So with that, that is all I have, but would certainly welcome additional questions.